The Bosnian Serbs wanted to get rid of all the Muslims who were in the area, and that resulted in what we come to know today as ethnically cleansing of the women and children, and sometimes the older men if they're lucky. And I remember turning to my wife at the time and saying, well, if they do create a tribunal, then they'll need experienced investigators, and I'll be applying.
Yeah.
Not thinking for a minute that I'd ever be accepted, or in fact that a tribunal would be created.
But you had it in your heart and your mind that something had to be done. When you went out to Bosnia initially, what was it that first shook you? What was your first feeling, for example, when you saw a mass gravesite, something that you had not seen before?
I don't think words can describe it, really. I mean, coming from a police background, I've seen dead bodies in the past. The most I've ever seen at one time was 2. So to see a grave with potentially hundreds of bodies in it is, you can't really describe it. It's quite horrifying.
Did you tell them this is what we think has happened to your loved ones?
No.
Never?
No.
Welcome, Howard Tucker. It is an honour to have you here at Islam Channel for our podcast. Now, you have so much experience as a highly experienced investigative detective, so with over 50 years of experience, born in Wales, so obviously not somebody who is sleeping under the hills as a dragon, but somebody with fire in their breath. Tell us more about what you do.
What I do or what I did, I'm semi-retired now, but initially I was a police officer in South Wales. Excuse me. Joined in 1972 and became a criminal detective in 1975, and then worked for the next 25 years as a detective in South Wales and the Gwent Constabularies. And then in 1998 I was fortunate enough to get a secondment to join the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia as an investigator looking into war crimes.
Which is remarkable, but obviously it's not a surprise because of your experience at the time. We, for our viewers, would like to know more about what was happening in the Balkans at that time. As you said, there was a war from 1991 to 1995, and the War Crimes Tribunal you were involved in. So tell us a little bit more about the political background, briefly, just what was actually happening out there at the time.
Well, very briefly, the viewers will probably know that there was a breakup of the former Yugoslavia. The former President Tito died in the late 1980s, and the former Yugoslavia started to recognise its nationalities and the various countries that formed the former Yugoslavia. And there was a rise of nationalism, which basically Slobodan Milosevic, who became the president of Serbia, decided that he didn't like the idea of the breakup of the former Yugoslavia and wanted to consolidate, I suppose, simplifying it, consolidate Serbia as the governing body of the former Yugoslavia and maintain the status quo, I suppose. So it resulted in him invading Slovenia in the summer of 91, I think it was. I think they called it a 10-day war. It was pretty bloodless, and he decided to continue his battles after leaving Slovenia behind and attacked Croatia. And there's a nasty war between Croatia and Serbia, and eventually it overspilled into Bosnia-Herzegovina in 1992, 93, I beg your pardon.
I mean, so psychologically speaking, these crimes that were going on must have been something that obviously you had not covered before, being a detective. What was going on out there was something so horrific that somebody like yourself, had not sort of even at that point been out there prior to that, or had seen those atrocities other than what was on the news. In your mind at that time, how did you feel about what was going on emotionally? How did it make you feel? I mean, you were obviously very shocked by what was going on, but thinking of those criminals as perpetrators, how did you feel about them and the psychology behind what makes those people carry out such horrific war crimes?
It's a very good question. I think, as most people in the UK, I was fascinated and horrified by the developing war in the Balkans. It was so close to home. Excuse me. And I first created the idea of becoming an investigator. I remember the date, it was the 16th of April 1993. I was watching the news at home one night when I come home from work and saw Colonel Bob Stewart, who was at that time in charge of the British UN forces in central Bosnia. And he was standing in front of a burning village, a village called Amici. And this is, I guess, 2.5 years before Srebrenica took place, the genocide. And he was outraged by the crimes that he had witnessed being committed against, as it happened, Muslim civilians in this small village, where it turned out 120 were killed by Bosnian Croat military who stormed the village. And he was standing in front of the burning village, and you could see the victims lying in the pastures and the fields behind him. And he was absolutely outraged, and he was almost insisting that a war crimes tribunal be created to investigate what he saw as war crimes taking place. And I remember turning to my wife at the time and saying, well, if they do create a tribunal, then they'll need experienced investigators, and I'll be applying.
Yeah.
Not thinking for a minute that I'd ever be accepted, or in fact that a tribunal would be created.
But you had it in your heart and your mind that something had to be done.
It was. And if they, my thought, I had 25 years as a detective and 27 as a cop. And I'd been involved in investigations of murder and serious crimes up until then. And of course, I knew there would be serious perpetrators there. And if they were going to have this tribunal, they'd need experienced investigators. And I felt it was not an obligation, but I wanted to do it. I mean, it's...
So a man of justice.
Yes.
Right from the beginning of your career.
Well, exactly. As an experienced investigator, you can't be involved in worse crimes than like war crimes, crimes of genocide and crimes against humanity. It's the pinnacle of your investigative career, really.
Which I mean, obviously sounds, even as you're describing it, something that I can't even imagine somebody having to get their head around, you know, what was happening out there before they go there. I mean, how did you prepare yourself mentally and emotionally, knowing that you were going to see some of the worst crimes in history? Because Srebrenica has been known and has been declared a genocide,
yes.
and the only genocide since World War II. So you must have known previously that this was going to be something extremely difficult that's going to touch you to the core and shake you up. So the preparation mentally must have been something that you had to think about a long time to get your head around?
Not really. I think as any of the investigators who worked in the tribunal, the majority came from very experienced policing backgrounds, as I did. And so you've been involved in nasty crimes, not on this scale, of course, but nasty crimes. You're used to dealing with victims of crime and obtaining witness statements and searching for fugitives, suspects, and arresting them. So that part of it is the norm. But I don't know if I mentally prepared myself for the horrors of genocide, because of course we went there to investigate war crimes and crimes against humanity. At that time, we didn't know if genocide had been committed. It was really...
So that's something that we discovered afterwards.
It came through a natural process of investigation, because without going into the details of the law in relation to genocide, it's very specific, the conditions that you have to meet to reach the criteria. So you start off investigating crimes, allegations. It could be an allegation of murder. And it's only when you develop the crime base that you realise the more serious offences are taking place.
So you were part of a large team?
Huge team, yes.
That went out there?
Yes.
What parts of the Balkans did you investigate? Where did you investigate first?
My first investigations were in central Bosnia, and as fate would have it, the first investigation I was put on was the attack on the village of Amici, the one that I'd seen Colonel Stewart standing in front all those years before. So it's quite a surreal feeling to actually be involved in that investigation. But I spent the first 2 years involved in investigations in central Bosnia, and that was crimes allegedly committed by the Bosnian Croats against the Bosnian Muslims. And so when we finished those investigations, I was then put on to other investigations and ended up, I did a couple of years in Kosovo and Macedonia, and then returned as head of office to Bosnia-Herzegovina in 2005, and then remained there for the next 8.5 years.
And when you went out to Bosnia initially, What was it that first shook you? What was your first feeling, for example, when you saw a mass gravesite, something that you had not seen before?
I don't think words can describe it, really. I mean, coming from a police background, I've seen dead bodies in the past. The most I've ever seen at one time was 2. So to see a grave with potentially hundreds of bodies in it is, you can't really describe it. It's quite horrifying.
Was it on a larger scale than you had imagined previously?
No, it was about what I thought. I mean, there was the 400 was within the grave that I went to, and it was. It's quite a thing to imagine that you've got 400 souls that sit there in the grave there.
And in that grave at the time, they were men? They were mostly men? Men.
Majority, yes, all of them, in fact.
What happened to the women?
Ethnically cleansed from the village, from the surrounding villages, I should say. This was in Prijedor East, in western Bosnia, not Srebrenica itself.
So at the time, you found out that the men were separated from the women?
Yes.
At what age were the men separated?
They varied ages from, I think, in that grave was 14 to 74, I think, was the vast span of age groups, as is replicated in all the mass graves, to be honest.
And when they were separated, did the women know where their men were going?
No idea. No idea. I guess they...
Did they, I presume they had hope they were going to escape?
Always. I think hope is always there. Even today, there's probably some women that hope that their loved ones are in a prison somewhere.
How many do not know where their loved ones went?
In Srebrenica alone, there's upwards of 800 men and boys missing, still missing. 30 years after the event. And that's only in Srebrenica.
30 years from Srebrenica, this year? This year.
With the 11th of July this year was the 30th anniversary of the genocide of Srebrenica. 8,347 men and boys were killed in a matter of 4 days.
And what was the reason leading up to this, for the war, for that separation, for that genocide? What led up to that particular genocide?
It's a complicated story, as you understand, but I guess the basic thing was that the Bosnian Serbs wanted to get rid of all the Muslims who were in the area. And that resulted in what we come to know today as ethnically cleansing of the women and children, and sometimes the older men if they're lucky, and the eradication of all the male population. And simply put as that. I mean, it's more complicated than that, but that's what it meant in reality. They wanted an ethnically pure Serbian area devoid of Muslims.
So everybody was told to move from their villages?
They weren't told, they were forced. I mean, all the surrounding villages were attacked at various times. And when I say attacked, I mean shelling and soldiers going through with rifles, killing whoever they could find there, and purging the area of the civilian population, and chasing them wherever they were running, and eventually corralling them, if I can use that term, and to simplify it into them.
Did those who escaped have a chance? No.
Not a chance at all, in my view. Not a chance at all. When they eventually were corralled in the area, if I can say generally, the municipality of Srebrenica, quite a large area, there was upwards of 30,000 people. It depends. There's no direct body count, but around 30,000 refugees poured into this small town that could originally have about 8,000 people there.
So when they were forced to go, there was no alternative?
None. I use the word corralled because they were chased, if you like, pursued by the armed military who were shooting them, shelling them at every opportunity.
From all parts of Bosnia?
They were surrounded eventually.
And how large was Srebrenica at the time? Was it large enough to hold everybody?
No, it's a town of, I think it's about 8,000 people was the population of Srebrenica at that time, and it ended up, as I say, 30,000 refugees there, trying to find places to live. And this isn't overnight. They're there for a long time, sometimes as long as 18 months or more. They're in this area.
What did they take with them?
What they could carry, sometimes less than that. Sometimes they were literally attacked in the night or early hours in the morning, and they had to literally run away with whatever they had, losing family members from the moment they left their homes until they were corralled there.
So even pregnant women, carrying young children, babies?
Absolutely. Horrendous. I mean,
did they have anything to eat?
No. Well, I'm saying that they carried what they could. Some managed to carry some, others not. But quite often they would leave in the forest, as they generally were, or in abandoned villages that had been burned out by the Serbs. They would go out at night. When I say they, the adults, the males generally, but quite often the mums and the mums would accompany them, to forage for food. And sometimes this would mean going back to the nearest village that's been forcibly evicted to try to forage for food there. And sometimes it was the summer, so the fields were planted still with the corn which was ripening. So sometimes they would go into the fields of corn to get the corn just to have basics to eat. It was,
And I presume finding water would have been very difficult.
Very difficult. I mean, it has a lot of mountain streams and what have you, although it's the height of summer and it can get very hot in Bosnia in the summer. So water was always a problem.
How strong were they before they left? Or were they already weakened before they had to run?
Most were okay, I think, at the time, because they were living in fear, of course, of what was going to take place. But they were, in the main, unless they were naturally ill or injured, but they were in the main.
Were the signs there prior to them having been forced to flee? Were the signs there that a genocide was approaching?
No, not. No, I would say not the genocide. I think the majority knew that war was coming. Some of them believed it would, or hoped it wouldn't. I suppose it's better than saying believed. Some knew it was coming and left early. Some still hoped and prayed that it wouldn't. But generally, I think, from my experience, it was a complete surprise when it actually happened, because it wasn't just the shall we say, the Bosnian Serb army that came through. It was neighbours, people they'd lived with and known for years. Got arms together and were involved in forcibly evicting.
So there were a lot of different factions there.
Yeah, lots of different
And
factions.
I guess that added to the confusion. Was who was friend, who was foe?
Exactly, and the horror. I mean, imagine a neighbour that you've known for all your life, maybe had coffee with them, your kids went to school with, to suddenly come in with a rifle and saying, you've got to go. I mean, I can't
Somebody
imagine
that
it.
you had perhaps talked to on just an ordinary level, socialised with.
Well, frequently that was the case. They knew them. It's not just a case of somebody they passed in the street and waved to. These are people who they socialised with as much as they did with the coffee on the veranda, or the kids played together in school.
Completely peaceful previously.
Completely peaceful. No sign of this taking place at all. It's really hard even now to really get my mind about how that could happen, where communities that were
Yes.
fully integrated and got on well together can suddenly literally overnight change. I still can't quite understand how that happens.
But it wasn't just the Muslims, Bosnian Muslims, that suffered.
No.
There were other groups, other religions that suffered.
Yeah, I mean, and there were three warring factions in Bosnia, basically. Bosnian Serbs, Bosnian Croats and Bosnian Muslims. And each side has lost people in circumstances less than savoury, shall we say. But the fact remains is that the attack on the Muslim population was by far the greatest atrocities that took place. I used to remember the percentages, I can't now, but it's something like 80% of the crimes were committed against Bosnian Muslims. Really high.
And why was it against Bosnian Muslims particularly? In your mind, was it Islamophobia? Was it political? Was it to do with different ethnicity? What was
It's an interesting
main
question,
issue?
and I'm not sitting on the fence, but I think it's a combination of all the above. But I think the main reason is that the Bosnian Serbs wanted to have a Serbian pure area. So, yes, it was religion. It was Muslims out, Serbs who were Orthodox in.
And as part of the team, when you were out there, obviously you must have discussed what was going on. What was it like when you went out in the day and then had to come back and create, for example, your, as you're saying, percentages, your numbers, your spreadsheets, your facts? What was the feeling like in the room when you were gathering the facts and realising the horror of what was happening? How did you interact with each other?
When you're on mission, you tend to, even if you go as a group, you tend to work pretty much on your own because you have your own mission objectives. You might be working with a group of people who are working on different investigations within the overall picture of the crimes. And so when you're out on the mission, you're with your interpreter and generally not with anybody else. the time that you meet is I mean, quite often I was on my own on mission. So you'd meet when you go back to the base after your mission. You normally...
With other investigators?
Normally... Yeah,
Who was there?
Normally, if I went away, occasionally I'd be with other groups, but generally you'd be on your own. So you'd be with your interpreter. You go to the head office.
So the interpreter.
You interpret yourself, and off you go. And then you go back to process all your material back to in this case, to Holland, to the head office there. So you normally spend a month away, come back and do a month of processing, and then do pretty much that.
So tell us more.
But to answer your question, when you got back to base, you had to process your material, whatever you gathered, and then you'd have team meetings to discuss your progress on the mission. And then you'd have a talk with the team lead and the rest of the investigators and the team lawyers to discuss what you found out fits into the overall investigation plan. So you'll have an investigation plan loosely of where you think your crime base is, and by that I mean where the crimes were in your area, what crimes were committed, who was affected, what are we looking at, and so forth. And
I guess to plan for the next day, what further work you need
to
do, who else do you need to talk to, where do you need to go.
Because it's not just a case of taking the statements, that's a big part of it. But then if I'm on a mission, I might take 20 statements. But when you go back, you don't have time to analyse those when you're away. But when you get back, you analyse the statements and find comparisons and find out where they're going to fit in. If there's any other leads, are there any leads to mass graves, to archives of military documents, political documents, weapons, all kinds of stuff. You know, you literally thoroughly examine what's there and make an assessment and then decide on what the next steps are.
Is this work as an investigator in general? When you do investigations, when you're a detective, is it the same style of work? Was being an investigator rather than a detective completely different?
Very similar.
Tell us a little bit about what an investigator does in their everyday life and how that was different when you were out in Bosnia.
It's very similar. I mean, you have a crime. I mean, as a detective on division, you have your allocation of work when you come into the morning, and that might be a theft of a handbag, or it might be an assault on a person in the street. It might be an allegation of rape where there'll be a group of you working. It could be a fraud. You just don't know until you go into work, and then you prioritise your work accordingly. But if it's a major crime, by that I mean a murder, a rape or serious assault, then you tend to have a group of investigators working on it. You'd have a officer in charge, a senior investigating officer who would allocate work to you. As an investigator in The Hague, that didn't happen so much because, for example, in Amici, the first investigation, there's 120 dead. And I was the only investigator at that time.
So you had a lot to look at. You had a lot of
stuff.
Crime scenes, or in fact, not even lots of little crime scenes, but huge crime scenes to look at, to take information from and analyse.
Yes.
All at the same time.
Mine was considered, at that time, 120 is quite a lot. But when you think about the lads who were looking at that time, investigating Srebrenica, which is Serbian crimes against Muslims, I was looking at Croat against Muslims. Some of their crime scenes were 1,500 people.
Wow.
And yet they had a bigger team, but even then they might only have a team of half a dozen or so looking into 1,500 murders.
And I mean, you can't even imagine those numbers.
But without trying to simplify it, your approach to any major crime is the same whether you're a domestic detective or an investigator. You had to establish your crime scene, what crimes are committed. You had to find out where the crime scene is.
So you're not ever relying on someone else telling you those bodies that you have to see it for yourself.
You have to get it. Well, either that or your team, your scenes of crime team will have to be there, and you normally have an investigator who's in charge of that particular investigation will be present at the exhumation, and they'll be involved in the obtaining of the evidence and so forth.
And part of that evidence, I presume, was speaking to those survivors of those crimes, families of the victims, families of those who had disappeared and never been found.
Mm-hmm. I can probably do best to kind of quote you what my last chief prosecutor said in relation to witnesses. The witness is still the core element of evidence for the courts of the tribunal. So that puts into context how important witness testimony is. It's not the be-all, end-all, but it's the fundamental basis of any investigation that you have, especially if you're taken to court under our judicial process.
Were you surprised that those victims of crimes, but also the families of those who were slaughtered, were you surprised at their strength, that they were able to tell you what happened?
I still am. I'm in awe, actually, of them. They're amazing people. I mean, the majority of women from Srebrenica for the crimes, because most of the men have been killed, and their strength of character. And bear in mind, when they started their organisations, their victim organisations, the likelihood of any sort of success in an investigation was remote, a remote dream for them. It seemed almost impossible, and yet they never gave up, and they still don't give up. I think it was Munir Subotic, who leads the Association of Mothers of Srebrenica and Shepherd Enclaves. I think she said that it's about truth and justice. Truth is finding the remains of our loved ones, and justice is seeing those perpetrators go to court. And I don't think I can say it any more concisely than her words. And they live by that. I mean, I think I mentioned earlier, there are over 800 men and boys still missing. 800 from Srebrenica alone, 30 years on. That's 800 mothers, sisters, cousins who don't know where their families are.
No, you have no idea. It's the unknowing, and they must have had hope.
Yeah, they did initially.
That
definitely.
Those people that had disappeared were going to come back, as you said.
Absolutely.
They had that hope, and I guess many of them hoped that the horrific war crimes that happened to their loved ones were quick. I mean, they would have had to talk to you about what they saw, what they experienced, and also what you knew as well was happening that they didn't know. Was it a two-way conversation? Did you tell them, this is what we think has happened to your loved ones?
No.
Never?
No. I mean, you don't want to put ideas into a witness's mind. You want to hear what they have.
It was all from them.
So you need to be able to, I mean, how do you access the worst horrors? How can I talk to you as a woman and try to find out from you the worst horrors of you've lost your husband, you've lost your 2 kids, you may have been sexually assaulted. How can I possibly encourage you to access those memories to tell me?
Yeah.
I mean,
I can't believe that they actually did, but they did it for justice. They did it for their loved ones as well.
And so you want them to give you their memories. Yes, you need to prompt them sometimes if they get stuck or if they go off track a bit, but you don't want to tell them anything. You want to encourage them to tell you. That's the big difference.
Yeah. And I presume these skills that you clearly have and also learnt in dialogue, in conversation with people, you must have had this as well when you were working domestically as a detective. What were some of the skills that you needed as a detective working in Wales, but also what did you do? What crimes did you come across when you were working in Wales, and which would have helped you when you had to work in Bosnia? Did you take those skills with you, and is that where you learnt them?
Absolutely. I mean, I was a cop for 27 years, 25 as a detective. I probably investigated or was involved in investigations of everything on the statute book in the UK, basically, from theft of a handbag to murder and kidnapping. I mean, murder and kidnapping, I was part of a huge team then, and I might have been involved in house inquiries, investigating witnesses, scenes of crime. You were allocated a duty, depending on what the case was.
Can you tell us about some of those crimes that you had to investigate?
In the UK? Yeah, I mean, murder, I mean, there's several I was involved in. A murder of a taxi driver that was never solved, actually, who was picked up in Cardiff and then found abandoned near a place called Bridgend, a taxi that he was taken off. I have no idea, but he was bludgeoned to death with a hammer, no matter what we... And
Bridgend, I've heard of, is not a particular, what I wouldn't think of as a particularly high crime area.
No, he was not in Bridgend. The body was found just outside Bridgend, right. But it was a very bizarre crime, picked up in an area called Fairwater in Cardiff by taxi and then found bludgeoned to death. I mean, we never solved that one, so that's one in particular. But there you're interviewing witnesses all the time. I didn't interview the witnesses of the victim at that time. But you develop skills of, what would you... you have to have patience. You can't rush it. You have to show some form of empathy. And
do you ever do the bad cop, good cop thing that we see in the films, that you have a certain style and
not with
each
witnesses? Not with witnesses. But yeah, I mean, it's overemphasized. But yes, there's a bit of psychological play there, of course.
So tell us more about that psychology as well, from also their point of view, the people that you are investigating, those people that you have picked up for doing a crime that you think, okay, these people could potentially have committed the crime that we're investigating. Mm-hmm. What do you think goes through their head when they are first brought in by you?
Again, a very interesting question, but I guess my instinct is to say the first thing, and I'll say, well, is that, I've never arrested a guilty man, if I can say that, and by that I mean is that everyone I've arrested has always said it wasn't me, Gov, it was somebody else.
They all said that from the beginning.
Pretty much. I mean,
none of them put their hands up and said, "Okay, it's me."
You do occasionally, but the vast majority don't. So it wasn't me. I wasn't there. It was somebody else. There's always denial there, and there's no difference in this scenario. And of course, you've got a situation where they don't have to talk to you. They have a legal right to silence. So,
is it worse for them if they don't speak? For example, do you automatically think, oh, you're not speaking, there must be some guilt? Or do you have no preconceptions?
I'd be lying if you said you don't have any preconceptions, because you've done a lot of research and evidence seeking before.
Okay, so you've done a lot of research before you even bring them in.
And if you arrest them, you arrest somebody because you arrest them on suspicion of, so you have a reason why they've been arrested. So they're already linked. You can't go and take somebody off the street just because you think, well, they don't look very nice. I'll take them.
Obviously there is definitely some investigation.
So you already have a preconceived idea that they're involved in some way. You may not know exactly. You might think that they've done it, but you don't know quite how. So you then have to try to find a way of being able to talk to them to find out what they're going to tell you about it. And quite often they'll say nothing at all. Or if they do talk to you, it's helpful if they talk to you, because if they tell lies, you've always got a chance of disproving their lies. So it's I
guess you have to also look at their body language, and not just what they're saying, but how they're saying it as well. And what about if you get somebody who's, so for example, we're talking about what I imagine here now, normal people, somebody you're having a conversation with, you're asking a question, they are responding, or they're saying, I don't want to respond. That's still, to me, almost normal human behaviour. What happens, and what did happen, if this did happen, when you interviewed somebody who you thought had something like psychopathic traits, or had a severe mental, or should we say personality disorder, a severe personality disorder? How would the interview go with them, and what was that like? Did that scare you when you came across, if you did, anybody like that who you thought, this person is not following the normal human norms and ways of responding?
Well, domestically, I mean, there are quite strict conditionalities in how you interview these interviewers. If you think they have a particular mental issue, then you have to go through a particular procedure to be able to interview them in the first place. Very complicated to go into now. But if I can transfer that to the war crimes arena, if I think about it, I can't think about how anybody can possibly think about killing thousands of people anyway.
So you don't have in your mind that person to do that has to be a psychopath? No.
I mean, clearly, they probably are. But
did they start off as normal people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the array of not just suspects, persons who've been convicted in the tribunal, you have teachers, you have ordinary guys who've come from a bricklaying or working in the fields. You've got politicians.
More scary though?
It is. I think it's scary on the scale of individuals. You have teachers, people who have unblemished records, turn out to be sadistic killers.
You actually had a case like that?
I've been involved on the outskirts of them, yes. I mean, and of course you hear about the cases back home. But I mean, what makes a respected politician or police officer, senior police officer, turn out to be either directly involved or complicit in these horrendous...
Or what you see as you look in their background, they've had a relatively, what you would think, a normal background,
Absolutely.
Normal upbringing, lovely, helpful parents that
married,
looked after
young
them.
children. I mean, if you're kind of a study of history and you look back at Hitler's entourage and you see some of the psychopaths who were involved there, some of those came from very ordinary backgrounds.
Well, what I can't understand is somebody like Hitler he was an artist. You imagine these skills for somebody who's got empathy, or some emotion, and then they turn out to be the person who's responsible for genocide.
It's I mean, yes, we've all seen some horrible things. One of the things that we found that was very useful for trials, it's a horrific tape, is the execution of people done by a notorious group of people called Arkan's Tigers, if I remember rightly. But they were taken from the Srebrenica enclave. And they're taken out. You can see them taken out of their lorries, lined up on the road, and walked off individually into areas, lined up and shot one by one.
Wow.
Lined up, and then the next person in line has just seen the man in front of him being killed. He knows he's going to be shot next.
Yeah.
Then they save two at the end who pick up the bodies, take them to a pit and throw them in there, and they're then shot and dropped in the pit. And you're watching these.
It's scary to think.
It's scary, but it's not just one or two shooters. These are a lot of people doing this.
Yeah.
And you just think to yourself,
like I said, they're not just one or two people that you've just, okay, we have to get him. He's the person responsible. So often they have an army behind them.
Absolutely. You imagine if let's, for argument's sake, on this particular video, I think you see 4 or 5 shooters. I can't remember exactly now, and somebody who's taken the photograph. And you see them go on and do some house cleaning as well afterwards. Well, if you look at say there's 5 there, you might have 1 or 2 who you could classically call psychopathic, perhaps. But the others aren't.
No.
They're ordinary people. How
so did you ever think about what turned those people?
Always. I still do. And one thing that puzzles me, even today, is that you can perhaps understand some of them have been coerced into killing and threatened that if they don't, their families will be dealt with. You can understand that. But we're 30 years on now, the political situation has changed. I couldn't live with my conscience if I'd killed somebody. I'd have to tell somebody about it, if not to say, get off my chest. But maybe I know where some of these 800 missing are. How can they go to bed at night knowing that they may have the information about where the loved ones of these people are? I can't quite understand how...
I mean, when you did come across those who were in that situation, what did you... How did you think that they felt? I mean, do you think that they regretted what they did? Do you think that they thought, okay, well, I wasn't the first perpetrator. I was just in the background there. Therefore, I'm not that guilty. What sort of personalities did they have when they were caught? Did they feel regret? Did they feel that they were responsible, or did they feel that they were coerced or led into that, or, for example, they were persuaded to do that war crime?
I never had one who confessed. There are those who did go to court and actually made what they call a statement of guilt before the court, and so they admitted their guilt and offered their apologies and what have you, and tried to explain why they did it. Very few and far between. So it's a difficult question to answer. I think that a lot of them are in denial. A lot of them...
So they didn't say, well, I'm really sorry, it was because I was coerced, I don't know what came over me. Not that type of attitude.
I mean, some did, very few. Some did, very few. But the others, I think, just went, that they know, either they believe completely what they did and just don't care.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Why do they deny it?
I don't know. But an interesting point to this, perhaps, is that some of those senior ones who were found guilty by the court have returned to Bosnia, have been greeted with a hero's welcome even today. And some of them have actually implied that they didn't do it and don't regret what they've done. I mean,
wow.
it's bizarre.
That's
you know,
to hear that, like, even when you have pointed out what they have, all their crimes in court, and they've heard the history, they've heard what happened from the beginning to the end, they've heard that, and they knew they were involved, but they've also heard it from outsiders, and not just one outsider, not just what they perceive as the enemy, but somebody who they perceived as neutral, telling them, this is what happened, this is what you've done, and this is why you're guilty. They still Don't accept it.
Don't accept it. And you hear, I didn't see this myself, but when Ratko Mladic, who was the military commander, was facing the court, of course, the surviving mothers of Srebrenica were in the public gallery, which is protected by a glass and bulb. But he was doing all kinds of terrible things towards them, like looking at them grinning.
So he was taunting
his
victim. Well, he was taunting the victims, but the families of the victims,
Absolutely.
but taunting you
smiling and
as
grinning.
well. Wow,
In court. This is the arrogance of the man.
that's horrible.
Horrible.
Yeah,
I mean,
I can't imagine what the families of victims were feeling at that point, seeing him do that, hearing that as well.
Well, that's another thing that amazes me about their capacity to, I suppose, forgive is the ones.
Did many of the families of the victims, did they forgive their
They do
perpetrators?
forgive them. They do. If you speak to them now, the majority will say, I forgive them. I would shake their hands today. If they admit what they've done, I'd shake their hands today. If I'd lost 22 members of my family, I genuinely don't think I could do that.
Wow. And is that to help them survive? Is that to help them overcome the horrors that they feel, those memories? Or is it that they just have no other choice
I think it's deeper than that. I think, again, I mentioned Munira Subic. There's many I could mention, but she talks about making a better future for her surviving relatives, and she doesn't have many in for the kids.
So not even about their own survival, it's about their children now.
It's about the future.
Who are growing up.
It's about the future. They want to make sure that there is not this, I hate them because they killed all my family, but I forgive them for what they've done. Let's get on with life. We have to coexist. And that's the kind of, I wish I could remember the quote from Munira, but there's quite a few who say some very amazing things.
Do you think their religion helped them? Do you think the Bosnian Muslims who suffered from these war crimes,
definitely, I think their religion
helped?
Definitely has helped them. I have no doubt about that at all. None whatsoever.
Did it make you think about your existence and religion
Always.
and what we're here for?
Yeah, it does. I mean, yeah, it must do. I think most people would in some ways. I mean, I'm not a spiritually active individual. I am a Christian. I have a few issues with my God at the moment, which I haven't resolved yet. But no, I certainly have beliefs, and I admire this.
And you would have talked to the Christians out there that had, were persecuted.
I'm very few, because all the victims I've dealt with have been in Bosnia have been Muslims, Muslim victims. Yeah. Amazing. And as I mentioned,
what skills did you feel after being there? I mean, obviously, in my mind, I think you must have developed resilience. What skills did you then take back to England with you after this? And what did you do then with those skills?
I'm thinking deep about that, because the skills I developed my interpersonal skills, of course. I mean, you can't possibly... Each individual investigator will have a different method of approaching, although it's very similar in its style. You have to find your own way of relating to the person you're talking to. And I always believe that I had to give a piece of myself to you as a victim, for example, for you to be able to start to trust me, and then develop a dialogue which encouraged that belief. How do I do that? I'm not quite sure, but you have to find a way. You know, I find it. I might talk about my family. I might talk about the losses I've had in my life, which don't compare anywhere to what theirs were. But I guess
it does make you put everything into perspective about your own life.
It does. It does. But I'm always still aware I'm talking to somebody who's lost everything, and I want them to tell me what their worst moments in life, and that's a big ask of anybody.
You want them to tell you?
Yes. I want them
to help them?
I would like to say yes, but initially, no. My motivation is for the evidence that they've got, isn't it? I mean, and be honest with you now, yes, that is. But it's also to do it in such a way as to... Because the majority want to tell you about it, because nobody's listened to them, and they want to have some form of justice, even though whatever justice I can offer them will probably fail into insignificance. So, yes, and I do believe that the majority... When I talk to them, are relieved. They have a relief about talking to me. I won't apply to all of them, but a majority. But I'm always aware, how do you ask a person to divulge the innermost secret that they don't want to tell? It's the worst thing they've experienced in life, and you want them to revisit them. And when you're talking to these wonderful people and you get them into that zone, they're not with you in that interview room anymore. They're back in that horrible day when the worst things happen to them. Mm-hmm. And you can see it in their eyes and their demeanour. And I defy anybody not to be touched by that. So you have to be aware of it and not interrupt them, let them and quite a few broken down and cried in the middle of it, and you show them whatever support you can for that, and obviously tell them that they can stop. The majority don't want to stop. I've had one or two who say I can't talk anymore. But they want to talk, and it's just to show them that you understand as best as you can what they're going through.
And when those perpetrators are caught,
yes,
the way you feel about everything has come to a conclusion. Perhaps justice has been done. Perhaps it hasn't fully been done, but they are caught. And when the victims know that the perpetrators have been caught, what is the difference between how you feel about the perpetrator getting his comeuppance and how the victim feels? And is there anything in common?
I think our two emotions are different because how can they ever be satisfied with the justice at the end of the day? And I'll tell you a quick story, if I may. At the start of the investigation, this is going back to the beginning of my time there, nothing more than the death penalty would satisfy any of them. Anything less was just not justice. Because, of course, in the former Yugoslavia, there was a death penalty. So they couldn't quite get their heads around the idea that there was not going to be a death penalty. No matter how many people they murdered, there was going to be no death penalty. And so this was a huge step for them to overcome, because some of them thought, how can it be justice if it's not an eye for an eye type of situation? And so they had to modify their expectations constantly with the tribunal. So fast forward then to when it takes place, they're delighted that they're sentenced. Nothing more than life imprisonment would do for them, natural life. Anything less would not be satisfactory, but they were still, I won't say satisfied, they're still pleased that they've been arrested and convicted, because and they said this many times to me, they don't believe that they would have had any justice at all if the tribunal hadn't been there. So that's, for me, is the big thing, is that they feel there has been, it's not been
There's
totally,
been something.
There's been something there. People, perpetrators have been brought to justice.
And perhaps enough for them to walk away from.
I don't think it'll ever be enough. I think that's probably the wrong thing to say, but they're satisfied that what has been done is as much as they could expect to be done, and so they're satisfied in that. And I'm not evading the question, but that's
that's a better way of
try to put it into context. And they've always been so. It's embarrassing how grateful they are to the tribunal and people like me, when we should be grateful to them for opening their hearts and soul to us. But from my point of view, I had great satisfaction.
Yeah.
I mean, to see somebody like Ratko Mladic get sentenced, and I was actually in Holland when Karadzic appealed against his sentence conviction, so he was hoping to get off. But it worked against him because he was only given 40 years imprisonment initially. Wow. But at the end of the appeal, they amended and upgraded his 40 years to life imprisonment.
Where he still is in prison.
Well, he will be forever.
That's good.
And absolutely. So and when I can still, in my mind's eye, see his look on his face when they gave him, he didn't believe it.
He was shocked?
Absolutely shocked. He's suddenly, 40 years seemed like a long time to him, but at least he had a chance of parole after 2/3.
Was it satisfying seeing his shock?
What? I'm not ashamed to say yes, it was. I had a real, yes, you deserve that, my friend.
And I guess for everybody else in the courtroom too.
Yeah.
Did you ever think that something as horrific as a genocide in Srebrenica would happen again in your lifetime?
No. Well, I hoped. I had to modify that quickly because, yes, my heart said no, it'll never happen again. But in reality, human nature as it is, I was afraid it was going to happen again. And
that fear, I presume, is there for so many of us, that something as horrific as what happened in Sarajevo is happening in Gaza. Well, even before that, it happened in Ukraine. Ukraine. We've seen it unfold again now. So we got two situations. Fortunately, we have the International Criminal Court who are tasked with investigating these things as the independent body.
And we as UK and other European countries signed up to the existence of the ICC, the International Criminal Court. When the tribunal finished, everybody realised that the work that the tribunal did was actually quite good, quite groundbreaking and very good outcome, and decided that we should have a permanent court, not an ad hoc UN organisation. So when this was created, I was very pleased, because I thought at least there's going to be some justice for these areas that would never face it before. So the independence of this organisation, to me, is paramount. And I'm from the UK, and I think the independence of the judicial process is paramount.
A lot of people have tried to point out crimes that are going on in Gaza from the footage that they've seen from people's mobile phones, from the journalists that have been there.
Yes.
And also the absence of information, because journalists have been killed in Gaza. Do you feel, therefore, that more must be done to bring those to justice? And do you think we can do that?
I think there's a couple of angles for an answer to that question. We know, for example, that the ICC have issued arrest warrants for Netanyahu and his I forget which member it is now, it's escaped my memory, and the Hamas leader who's been killed. So the arrest warrants are there. Now, they've been issued because there's been a decision by the chief prosecutor of the ICC that there's sufficient evidence against those individuals for them to be arrested and charged or indicted with war crimes. But that's just the start of the investigative process. That says that there's a prima facie case.
Does it normally take that long?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
right.
you look at the
because people are asking, why is it taking so long?
Have a look at how long some of the investigations took in The Hague. I'm not saying it's satisfactory. It's not. But under international justice, it takes time to take place for various reasons, which wouldn't happen in domestic courts. And because it's an independent investigative process, they're not going to discuss the process of the investigation, and it would be wrong for them to do so. It would prejudice whatever they're trying to achieve there.
So even if things are going ahead and in the process, we don't know yet?
I can guarantee there'll be investigative process going on. Now, I doubt very much at this stage whether the investigators have been allowed into Gaza, but they won't be far away, and they'll be collecting evidence as best.
Is that what often holds an investigation back? Access?
Yeah, of course it will. Of course it will. Absolutely. But it won't stop it. That's what I try to encourage people to understand. You know, it's like, I don't like analogies, but like the duck on the water, it seems that nothing is happening, but I assure you there'll be a lot happening in the background. It's complicated because you have countries that don't acknowledge the ICC, the US, for example, and others. And so the principals, whoever they are, the suspects, can travel to those countries without fear of being detained. In other European countries, such as the UK, they have suggested that they would arrest them if they came here. I sincerely hope they would, because not to do so, to me, is, I can't imagine a situation anywhere you wouldn't. We support the process of the independence of the court. Why would we not support the findings of the court? And so...
Are you personally shocked that it's gone on this long?
I'm not surprised.
Okay.
I'm not surprised. I mean,
and why is that? Is that because of the background history?
More than that, really. The war is still going on. It's very difficult to investigate. I mean, our guys did go in when the war was still going on, and it was extremely dangerous for them. And there was some areas where they couldn't actually get access to. So to conduct an investigation in a war zone is, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's difficult. First of all, you have to have access. If you don't have access, you can't investigate on the ground.
Who will be the people who will investigate or are investigating right now? Will they be detectives like yourself?
Yeah, but maybe a mix. There'll be investigators from various backgrounds. For example, in the tribunal, you didn't just have police investigators. You had military investigators. You had customs and excise investigators. Investigators from all over, but all had the requisite requirements to be employed as investigators. And so they'll have the same in the ICC. We don't know, and neither should we know what's going on. I mean, you working on the same basis of the independence of judiciary, you know, think about the domestic murders. You know nothing about or shouldn't know, and you don't know anything about the environment. They'll say, we can't discuss the case, but rest assured we're supporting the families and we're investigating for
If you were at the beginning of your career again?
Yes.
Or perhaps the section where the part where you have done some detective work and you were looking to further your career in investigations, would you be the one to volunteer to investigate what's happening in Gaza?
Yes, I would. Much so, my wife would be very distressed to hear me say that. My family would too, but yes, I would.
But a lot of people would see your courage. A lot of people would say that's the right thing to do.
We had a discussion before. I'm not sure if it's courage. I'm an investigator. It's where my experience is, and it's something I think I could.
I mean, I
I'm
see
too
it
old
as
now. I think at 70, 73, I'm too
courage
old
too,
now.
though, because
Maybe.
you may have the experience, but you may not want to go out there.
I'd go out tomorrow, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, you know, that gives me hope in humanity. After us talking about, you know, criminal behaviour, it's nice to hear that there are so many more people that do want to see justice
There's like a
be
friends
done
who
and do want peace.
I got friends who are working in Ukraine now, who in the midst of it. I got friends who are in the ICC who they won't tell me, and I wouldn't ask them, but I know they'll be involved in these investigations. So there are good people out there who want to see this work done, and
That gives me
it's
hope.
frustrating.
That warms my heart.
Well, it's
you know?
frustrating to see the level of human loss that's carrying on out there. The conflict, the war has to stop now, and I'm not sure how we're going to achieve that. That's the first process, and then to get our guys and girls in
I think
there.
every day there is some horror that we see. Every day there's something horrific that we hear
And it will continue.
and read.
It will continue. And
And we just really,
that upsets me a lot.
yeah, we just hope and we pray as well that it will stop immediately,
Absolutely.
as soon as possible, today. And, you know, that those who are committing atrocities are brought to justice by the likes of yourself, like the likes of the International Court.
And that's not going to be easy when you have so many countries, big players who are against the idea. They'll be fighting every inch of the way, but I have no doubt that today that they will continue as much as they can to get justice.
Before we go,
Yes.
we do have to end this, and, you know, but
It's that time come already.
it
It's gone
is
quickly, isn't
already.
it?
It's gone so quickly. But before we do go,
Yes.
what would be the one thing, the main thing that you have learnt in your career, in your life, that you would like to pass on to the next generation? Perhaps
The courage and determination of survivors and victims of the Bosnian genocide. Their courage,
Yeah.
their determination, and their willingness to forgive and proceed with life. Amazing.
Thank you. And that's, you know, that's good for me to hear as well. And everybody, you know, can hopefully take a piece of that with them.
Hopefully, yes.
And, you know, if we can spread that message, and if we can successfully, in the likes of yourself, give that message to the next generation and to others that are also looking for a career.
Absolutely.
Perhaps, you know, you can inspire them with that hope, with that information.
It's not an easy career, but it's so rewarding on all levels.
Would you do it all again?
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah. That has given me, you know, so much hope for the future in such dark times at the moment.
Yes.
And I really appreciate you coming to talk to us today.
Thanks for having me. I
And
really
for
enjoyed
having
it.
such a candid talk as well. And some of what you said was not easy to listen to, because knowing that it's going on today as well, knowing it had happened, and the families of those victims are still alive and still having to suffer those memories of what happened day
Yes.
after day. And I hope that those families that didn't find out what happened to their loved ones, I hope they do eventually find out what
Thank you,
happened.
so do I.
Thank you so much
Thank
for your
you
time
much.
today.
Thank you too.
And for all your work and
Thank you.
continued work as well. I hope also that we can perhaps hear more in a book, perhaps.
I'm writing one at the moment.
You're writing a book. Now, there you go. So we can read more about your work
I hope to, yes.
and what happened.
Mhm.
Because I think when it is documented, the more it's documented, the more we can learn and the more we can
Oh, I agree
prevent
with you completely.
those atrocities happening again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
been a
Howard
pleasure.
Tucker.
It's been a pleasure.
a great
Thank you.
pleasure for me too.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.